not an Asian American show on the air.
Yeah.
It's 20 years
Yeah.
since the last one. And so that was a huge advantage. It was just like, we're trying it, we're doing it. 20 years had passed. Whole new group of people, like, authentic voices, Asian Americans, minorities working behind the scenes, Like Nachka, who had been in comedy rooms for a lot, worked with Seth MacFarlane on American Dad, Family Guy, a bunch of other shows of her own too. That was, I think, the difference from 20 years ago.
Yes.
Actual writers, directors, people behind the scenes, storytellers, and authentic, different voices.
But you are telling Asian people family, but you face the white people market.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult to to tell this story to most of the.
What's interesting that I found, the more specific you are about something, the more universal it is.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
The more specific, because I'll tell you this, I remember when the pilot aired, we tested the pilot for the first time.
Yeah.
There's a very small scene where, like, Jessica Wong is in the Chinese supermarket, and it was sort of, it was based on, like, the Chinatown supermarkets I grew up going to, which is loud. It's not like what it is now, but when I was a kid going to Chinatown supermarket, it's big, it's loud, it's noisy, it's not that clean, and, when people watched that pilot, they said, "Oh, that Chinese market reminds me of the Mexican market, reminds me of the Lebanese market." And I said, "Well, that's the thing. If you're specific about it, then people will understand and people will relate." I was saying to somebody the other day that that toy when you're a little kid, and it's called the Chinese finger trap.
Yeah.
And then you put your finger in, and then when you pull out, it gets tighter.
Yeah.
But when you push in, it gets loose and you can come out.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same philosophy to me. Just be very specific about what you're doing, right? If you're talking about a Chinese family, be specific about that. If you're making a show about a Mexican family,
Yes.
be authentic and specific to what that experience is. Because people recognize what that is. Or if they don't, they want to know. It's human nature, I think.
Yeah. So you think this is the reason that make Crazy Rich Asians so popular right now?
Yeah. It's very specific to what that story is. They did an amazing job. I think, it's fun, it's lush, it looks really cool. You haven't seen that, especially in Hollywood. You've never seen that before.
Yeah.
I think you've seen it in Asia, but to the Western audience, you've never seen it. And they were very specific to what that is. They were specific to it's a Singapore family, a Singapore Chinese family. They were very specific about what Constance's character was, and they didn't gloss over anything. They were very, very specific, and I think that's really cool. And it's something that we try to do on the show all the time.
Maggie told me you have watched the 5-hour Taiwanese.
The pitching yesterday.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but Maggie told me that their story is very local, very Taiwan. But
I think that's interesting. I think that there's the characters. If they're characters that are Taiwanese, should be very specific about what that experience is.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think I heard a couple of things that I loved the point of view of the character. To make it more universal is just what's the idea that the character is involved in. But I think those are the advantages that you get to sort of play with, and that's what I mean by being very specific. Characters' point of views. If you're making a show about a Mexican person in Taiwan, you'd be very specific about the Mexican point of view in Taiwan, and be accurate.
So when you were doing producing the Fresh Off the Boat show and being specific to this Chinese Taiwanese family, and was there any investor doubt that this would be success or not because this is too specific on Asian American?
I mean, we luckily didn't have any investor beyond 20th Century Fox or ABC, so I didn't get to talk to individual investors. But I think, the idea was we're making a show for American television, and I think it was a strong enough idea, and the writing on the show and just the characters and the humor was strong enough that like it felt like it could be something that's universal, you know. And everybody, you know, you break down the experience. It's just you have to look beyond the idea that it's like a Chinese Taiwanese family and Asian Americans are a huge part of the audience. You look for the one thing that's common about the show, which is feeling like you don't fit in. Right? Everybody understands that. It's just like even you at school at some point, when you first start a school, you don't fit in with the group of people, or you feel like you don't until you do, you know? So it's that universal idea. It's not just, you know, they happen to be characters that are, you know, Chinese American in Orlando, Florida, but distill it down to the actual thing that everybody understands, whether you're Chinese or something else, you know?
So before the Fresh Off the Board, have you ever tried to making like this kind of story on TV?
Featuring Asian Americans, or
yeah, or at least ideas.
I've thought about it a lot. Admittedly, Fresh Off the Boat was the one that we actually put into development in a real way and put together. You know, I mean, you hear in the process of making these shows, you hear different ideas, you hear a lot of different things, and you try to, you know, put something together. Sure, but this is the one that sort of, you know, got enough momentum to happen.
So. Between Fresh Off the Board till now, Quick Weekend, so watch the Crazy Rich Asian on big screen. Do you think you finally find a success formula for like Asian story in Hollywood?
I hope so. I think
so. There is a really success formula.
I mean, I hope that now people are sort of perceiving it that way. So it's good. They're perceiving that there is some sort of formula, and you know, I hope it continues. It looks like it will. I think if we, as a community in the United States, take advantage of it, and I know there's a lot of people that are, and it's cool. You know, I've always said since the beginning of the show, which is. It would be the true success of like this is if it becomes not a novelty anymore. You know what I mean? Where it's like, oh my God, it's the first this. Well, it should just be happening, you know. And it's we no longer have to model it as the first anything.
Yeah.
It's you know, these are authentic stories, and there's an audience for it, and people want to watch it. You know, the good ones, the bad ones, all of it. You know, and. It feels like it's on its way to happening in a real way, you know.
Do you see there will be more and more Asian American focused film or shows in the future? Because
I do. I think
like,
it's happening now.
Yeah, it's happening now. But like, if there is the next one, and people like the majority of American people may not see this as that novel.
Well, what do you mean the majority of Americans?
Like white Americans, maybe they've already seen the Crazy Rich Asians and Fresh Off the Boat, and so they understand this kind of stories and plots, how immigrants families coming to the U.S. And then if you are producing the next one, and people do you see people would think, oh, this is like the last one?
I don't, because I think there are other ideas, and I think the community and the point of view opens itself to a lot of stories. It's not just a story about because I do think Fresh Off the Boat and Crazy Rich Asians are two completely different things that have found a great audience, and I think that the sort of Asian American point of view, or the immigrant to America, is a recurring thing that will give birth to a lot of other ideas. It just makes it bigger and cooler. At one point there'll probably be. I mean, you can trace it all the way back. It's like at one point, I remember when I was growing up, I loved watching. Karate Kid, which led to Rush Hour, and just like things evolved, ideas evolved, and including another sort of community and group that hasn't been represented is just opens the door to much more. Yeah.
What's the most difficult part when you treating the fresh of the board?
What's the most difficult part of? There were a lot of difficult parts.
I mean, like audience feedback will sometimes is not so.
Yeah, but that's part of just making TV shows.
Yes.
Right. So it's for Fresh Off the Boat, it was interesting. I think one of the most challenging, I wouldn't say it was difficult, I said it was challenging, but I loved it, was we were trying to find those three little kids. And I remember, in Asian American society. And I remember when I was a little kid, it's like I remember somebody saying, why don't you go to acting schools? You can find like three little kids. But then I sort of thought, if I were a 9-year-old kid, would my mother send me to acting school? No. It was like, Chinese American. I would be in, after school math tutoring or just something. Like that is something that I think culturally is not something that's that popular amongst Chinese or Asian American families, But it is changing now, which is very exciting, right? I mean, I was just sort of thinking back to when I was a kid, right? I would never, it was, the 80s and 90s, I would never go to acting school. That was not something my mother would say, go do. But the exciting part is, it is changing, and we found, 3 awesome kids, 2 from Arcadia, California, and 1 from Brooklyn, And, you watch, like, at the time, I think Ian was 7. I think he was like 7 years old. Ian Chen, whose family is Taiwanese and very. They were so excited when we shot here. They're wonderful. Lily and Alan are my favorite. He's a little actor. He's like in a huge movie coming up this summer, and he's doing another movie in between the show. It's great. Never, if I thought back to when I was a kid, I would never thought I'd see this day, but it's exciting.
Yeah. So what's the feedback, the audience feedback most impressed you?
On Fresh Off the Boat?
Yeah.
The thing that always impresses me is just that, they find the show funny and relatable, I hear that a lot. I remember I actually had a moment myself where I was a little sort of I was stereotyping somebody.
Yeah.
I was in Seattle, Washington, and it was at a conference, and this Caucasian man came up to me. He said, I love your show. I love Fresh Off the Boat. I said, oh, really? Thanks so much, right? And I said, oh, is your wife Chinese or Asian? And he just looked at me and said, no, why? And I said, I'm really sorry. I stereotyped you. In my head, I just sort of thought, like, why would you watch a show about a Chinese family? And I caught myself. And I had to apologize. And I said, I still, but that's so great to hear. It's just like, somebody found something relatable to it that isn't necessarily like the way we look. It was just who we are, like I relate to the family, I relate to raising kids, I relate to the humor of like and struggles and drama and whatever of living, in America and raising a family and all that stuff. That's great, But yeah, I felt really bad. I'm sorry I stereotyped you.
I read a report of you that you're talking about that when you read the novel, the 81 this novel, and you say it seems like it spoke to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you share with us your background experience related?